You know, Nia, I was looking at a map of Southeast Asia recently and realized how many tech founders treat the whole region like one giant monolith. They set up a shiny headquarters in Singapore and just assume the rest of the map will fall into place.
Exactly. It's such a common mistake. But the reality is that the playbook for Manila or Jakarta just doesn't translate to Hanoi. Welcome to the Vietnam Play, everyone. I'm Nia, and this podcast is made possible by 43 to 1, your full-stack market entry partner for foreign tech, fintech, and Web3 companies looking to navigate the unique landscape of Vietnam.
It's fascinating because as of April 2026, we're seeing that Vietnam isn't just a place for outsourced maintenance, it's actually where the builders live. I mean, with over 50,000 IT graduates entering the market every year, the technical density is incredible.
It really is. While other markets offer scale or English proficiency, Vietnam is becoming a center for core product development, from complex Web3 protocols to high-volume trading platforms. So let's dive into what actually makes this market different and how to avoid the Singapore-centric fallacy.
It is really striking when you look at that 50,000 number. 50,000 IT graduates every single year. That is not just a statistic. It is a massive infusion of fresh technical energy into the ecosystem. It makes me wonder, if everyone else is looking at Southeast Asia for operators or customer support, are they just completely missing the fact that Vietnam is actually a factory for engineers?
That is exactly what is happening. People often bucket the region into emerging markets and assume that talent is all entry-level or focused on service roles. But in Vietnam, the culture is fundamentally skewed toward building. We're talking about software engineering, blockchain development, and quantitative analysis. These are not people who just want to manage a dashboard. They want to know how the dashboard is wired. I have seen this firsthand. Vietnamese developers are not just taking orders from a headquarters in London or Dubai. They're the ones architecting complex Web3 protocols and scaling platforms that handle massive Forex trading volumes.
So if I'm a founder looking to hire, I can't just walk in with the same pitch I used in Singapore or Manila. It sounds like the substance over hype thing is real here. You mentioned earlier that flashy recruitment is like wearing a hublot in a room full of horology experts. It just doesn't land.
I love that analogy because it perfectly captures the local tech culture. It's a Swiss-made mentality. They respect the craft. If you come in with a bunch of marketing fluff and visionary talk without a solid technical roadmap, the top-tier talent will see right through it. They want to work on hard problems. They want to see the code. This is why building a team here is more like assembling a high-end watch collection. You start with that reliable foundational piece, that first key hire who sets the tone, and then you build up in class and capability.
It is interesting because that implies a different kind of leadership is required. You cannot just be a manager. You almost have to be a lead engineer in spirit, even if you are on the business side. If the workforce is heavily skewed toward engineering, does that mean the traditional regional director role is less effective in Vietnam?
Often, yes. A regional director who sits in an ivory tower and looks at spreadsheets is going to struggle to inspire a team of Vietnamese builders. You need people who can speak the language of the product. The technical density creates an environment where the unwritten rules of business are often dictated by technical feasibility and execution speed. If you are a global company, you have to realize that your Vietnamese unit is not just a branch office. It is a core product hub.
And that changes the whole market entry conversation, doesn't it? It is not just how do we sell here, but how do we build here? Which leads me to the consumer side. If the workers are that technically literate, I assume the average user is also a bit more under the hood than in other places.
Spot on. The technical literacy of the talent pool actually bleeds into the consumer behavior. You are not dealing with passive users who just click whatever button is the brightest color. You are dealing with active participants. If you launch a fintech app or a Web3 project, they are going to test for latency. They are going to inspect the smart contracts. They are going to ask questions that would make a standard customer support agent's head spin.
That is a daunting prospect for a company used to low-friction onboarding, where users don't ask questions. It sounds like you have to be ready for a much higher level of engagement right out of the gate.
You do. And that engagement is a double-edged sword. It means the barrier to entry is higher because you cannot hide behind a slick UI if the backend is messy. But it also means that once you win their trust, you have a community that actually understands your value proposition. They are not just there for a sign-up bonus. They are there because they respect the tech. But getting to that point, building that system of trust, is where most foreign companies stumble.
Let's talk about that system of trust. You mentioned that Vietnamese consumer behavior is deeply relational, comparing it to the local coffee culture. I have heard about this, the idea that you don't just grab and go. It is an intense sit-down experience. How does that translate to a digital fintech app or a blockchain protocol?
It is all about the paper cup versus the ceramic cup mentality. In a lot of Western markets, we want everything to be frictionless. We want to download an app, skip the tutorial, and start trading in 30 seconds. That is the paper cup approach: convenient, fast, disposable. But in Vietnam, the rhythm is different. People want to feel the weight of the relationship. They want to know who is behind the project. They want to see a presence that feels permanent and local.
So if a company just airdrops into the market with a massive marketing budget and a bunch of influencers, but no local roots, they are essentially trying to serve high-end coffee in a paper cup to people who want the full sit-down experience?
Precisely. And the sit-down part involves a lot of talking. The community is vocal. They talk to each other in Telegram groups, in cafes, in offices. If your brand positioning is not layered and sharp, you get tuned out. It's like a film with depth. If the subtitles are wrong or the pacing is off, the audience leaves. We see companies all the time who think localization just means translating their English website into Vietnamese using a basic tool.
Which is a disaster, I imagine.
It is a signal. It tells the Vietnamese user, we don't actually care about you enough to get the language right. And because they are technically literate and highly critical, they interpret that as a lack of security or a lack of commitment. Why would I trust my money or my data to a company that can't even hire a proper local copywriter? In Vietnam, high engagement means they are looking for reasons to trust you or reasons to move on to the next thing.
This high-trust, high-engagement model seems to fly in the face of the transactional approach we see in a lot of other emerging markets. You know, the give them $5 in tokens to sign up strategy. Does that just not work in Vietnam?
It works for vampire metrics. You know, those numbers that look great on a VC pitch deck, but don't actually result in a sustainable business. You can buy users, sure, but the moment the incentives dry up, they are gone because there was no relationship, there was no coffee. To win long-term, you have to simplify your complex ideas without talking down to them. You have to treat them like the sophisticated participants they are.
I love that phrase, without talking down to them. It is a delicate balance, right? You have to be accessible because the tech is complex, but you have to be rigorous because they are going to check your work.
It is the ultimate test of a brand substance. If you are a Web3 company, for instance, don't just talk about the future of finance. Talk about your specific consensus mechanism or your security audits. Show them the why and the how. In Vietnam, the community wants to be on the inside. They want to feel like they are part of the system of trust you are building. If you keep them at arm's length with generic marketing, they will stay at arm's length from your product.
It sounds like the fractional local unit approach we talk about at 43.1 is almost a necessity here, not just a luxury. If you need to be that on the ground and that relational, you can't really do that from a headquarters thousands of miles away.
You really can't. You need people who are drinking that same coffee, so to speak. You need people who are in those Telegram groups, who understand the nuances of the local slang, and who can represent the brand with authenticity. You are not just managing a market, you are joining a conversation that is already happening.
Okay, so we have the talent, the builders, and we have the consumers, the critical, relational participants. But then there is the elephant in the room, the gray zones. When we talk about regulation in Southeast Asia, everyone always points to Singapore as the gold standard because it is so clear. But you are saying Vietnam is different.
Different is a polite way of putting it. It is the biggest hurdle for any fintech or digital asset company. In Singapore, you have a checklist. You get license A, you follow rule B, and you are good. It's very binary. In Vietnam, the regulatory environment is evolving, but it is often unwritten or documented in ways that require deep local context to interpret. It's not necessarily that things are illegal, but rather that the framework for how to do it legally is still being constructed.
That has to be terrifying for a compliance officer in London or New York. I can see why many foreign founders might just say, you know what, let's wait until the laws are clear before we go into Vietnam.
And that is exactly how you miss the market window. By the time the laws are crystal clear and there's a checklist for dummies, the market will already be saturated by the people who are brave enough to navigate the gray zones today. You have to learn how to operate compliantly within the existing boundaries while simultaneously preparing for what is coming next. It's like driving in a fog. You can't see 5 miles ahead, but you can see enough to keep moving if you have the right local navigator.
So, what does navigating actually look like? If I am a Web3 company, for example, and I want to stay on the right side of the law, but the law hasn't been fully written yet, what is my move?
Your move is to focus on business development and relationships rather than just legal filing. You need people on the ground who understand the unwritten rules. This isn't about cutting corners. It is about understanding the intent of the regulators and building a presence that aligns with the country's broader goals, like digital transformation and tech leadership. You have to negotiate effectively and establish systems that protect the company while the formal legislation catches up.
It sounds like compliance in Vietnam is less like a form you fill out and more like a continuous conversation with the ecosystem.
That is a great way to put it. It is a conversation, and you can't have that conversation from a desk in Dubai. If you don't have local boots on the ground who can engage with the right partners and understand the local business climate, you are essentially flying blind. We see companies try to manage Vietnamese compliance remotely all the time, and they almost always hit a friction point that they didn't see coming because they didn't understand the local context.
I suppose that is where the fractional local unit concept really shines. You get the expertise of someone who knows where the gray ends and the red begins without having to hire a full legal and government relations team on day one.
Exactly. It is about agility. You need to be able to pivot as the regulations shift. If you have a massive, rigid in-house team, you're going to struggle to adapt. But if you have a fractional unit that is plugged into the local ecosystem, you can adjust your strategy in real time. You're basically buying regulatory insurance by having people who actually know what is happening on the ground.
It is a fascinating contrast. In Singapore, you pay for clarity. In Vietnam, you invest in relationships and local intelligence to navigate the lack of clarity. Both are paths to the same goal, but the skill set required for Vietnam is much more, let's say, entrepreneurial.
It really is. It requires a certain level of comfort with ambiguity. But for the companies that get it right, that ambiguity is actually a competitive advantage because most of your competitors are too scared to enter the gray zone, leaving the field open for those who have the right partners to guide them through it.
Let's talk about the actual mechanics of moving in. Traditionally, the big company move is to go all in. You rent a flashy office in District 1, you hire 20 people, you spend 6 months navigating labor laws, and you burn through a massive budget before you have even made your first local deal. Is that still the standard?
It is the standard, and it is a massive mistake. It is slow, it is expensive, and it is incredibly rigid. We call it the overhead trap. When you start with a massive in-house team, you are essentially betting that your initial assumptions about the market are 100% correct. But as we just discussed, Vietnam is complex and shifting. If your strategy needs to pivot 3 months in, but you have already signed a 2-year office lease and hired 20 people under specific labor contracts, you are stuck.
It is like trying to turn a cruise ship in a narrow canal. You just don't have the room to move.
Precisely. And in a market like Vietnam where things move fast, especially in Web3 and fintech, you need to be a speedboat, not a cruise ship. The traditional method also ignores the cultural friction of hiring. If you hire 20 people at once, you are not building a culture, you are just filling seats. And as we mentioned, the builder culture in Vietnam respects substance. If they see a foreign company coming in and just throwing money around without a clear, localized plan, the best talent will actually stay away because it feels hype-driven and unstable.
So, what is the alternative? If I am a global CEO, I want a presence in Vietnam, but I don't want the overhead trap. How do I avoid the pitfalls of the massive in-house move?
You use a fractional local unit. Think of it like your core global business is the main console. It is the engine that drives everything. You don't need to rebuild that entire engine just to enter a new country. You just need the right cartridge to plug into the local ecosystem. That is what we do at 43.1. We act as that cartridge. We plug directly into your global operations and handle the stuff that actually requires local presence: community management, local content, initial business development, and legal compliance.
It is such a modular way of thinking about business. It is almost like market entry as a service.
That is exactly what it is. It allows you to have a Vietnam presence immediately, literally within weeks, not months. You get the benefits of a local team, the on-the-ground intelligence, and the relational trust, without the massive operational drag of a full office and 20 full-time employees. If the market shifts or you need to adjust your approach, you can do it instantly because you haven't locked yourself into a rigid structure.
I can see how that would be a huge advantage for a fintech company that needs to test the waters before committing to a full-scale operation. You can actually date the market before you marry it.
I love that. Yes, you get to date the market. You get to see how the users react to your product. You get to build those initial relationships, and you get to navigate the regulatory environment with zero risk of overhead burnout. And then once you have proven the model and you have that system of trust in place, you can decide to scale up. It is a systematic way to grow rather than a reckless gamble.
It also sounds like it solves the remote management problem. Instead of a manager in London trying to understand why a Vietnamese partner is being quiet, they have a fractional unit in-country who can explain the nuance and handle the meeting in person.
Exactly. We are the subtitles for the global team. We make sure nothing is lost in translation, not just linguistically, but culturally and strategically. It allows the core global team to focus on what they do best, the global product. They don't have to become experts in Vietnamese labor law or local telegram etiquette overnight. They just plug in the cartridge and start playing.
I want to circle back to your watch analogy because I think it's so profound for the talent side of things. If we're avoiding the massive in-house move, how are we actually finding those Swiss-made builders? What does the watch collection strategy look like in practice?
It starts with your first piece, that foundational hire. In Vietnam, that person shouldn't just be a country manager with a nice CV. They need to be someone who embodies the technical substance of the market. They are your reliable automatic. They set the standard for everyone who comes after. If your first hire is a hype person or someone who is all about networking without technical depth, you will never attract the serious builders.
Because the builders want to work for other builders.
Exactly. It's a magnetism. If I'm a high-level blockchain developer in Ho Chi Minh City, I'm looking at who is leading the local unit. If it's someone I respect technically, I'm in. If it's someone who just talks about synergy and disruption wearing a flashy watch, I'm out. So your first step is to find that anchor. And this is where the fractional approach is so useful. A partner like 43-to-1 already has those relationships. We know who the Swiss-made talents are.
And then you step up as you grow?
Right. Once you have that foundation, you look for your daily driver, the people who are going to handle the day-to-day execution with precision. In Vietnam, this means looking for IT graduates who aren't just looking for a job, but who are excited by the complexity of your product. Remember, we have 50,000 graduates a year, but the competition for the top 5% is fierce. You win them by offering substance, not just a high salary.
What about the pitfalls here? What's the Hublot move of hiring in Vietnam?
The Hublot move is salary poaching without a long-term plan. Some foreign companies come in and just offer 30% more than the local rate, thinking that will buy loyalty. It doesn't. In the builder culture, if you lead with money, they will leave for money. You want people who are attracted to the movement or the technical challenge. Another pitfall is ignoring the relational aspect, even in hiring. In Vietnam, people often join teams, not just companies. If you lose a key leader because you didn't build a relationship with them, you might lose half the engineering team the next week.
That is a huge risk. So the watch collection is not just about individuals, it is about how they fit together as a cohesive set.
Exactly. You are looking for a style that is clean and bold, but never loud. You want a team that is confident in their technical ability, but humble enough to iterate. And you have to be patient. You don't buy a whole watch collection in one afternoon at the mall. You curate it over time. The fractional model gives you that time. It lets you borrow the expertise and the network, while you carefully select the pieces for your permanent collection.
It strikes me that this approach also protects the brand's reputation. If you come in and hire and fire rapidly, word gets around the tech community very fast. Vietnam's tech scene is dense, but it is also tight-knit.
Oh, news travels fast in the cafes and Telegram groups. If you treat talent like a disposable commodity, you will be blacklisted by the top-tier developers within months. But if you show that you are here to build something of substance, that you are investing in the Swiss-made quality of your team, that reputation becomes your greatest recruitment tool.
So the checklist for talent is 1. Start with a technical anchor. 2. Lead with the hard problem, not the big paycheck. 3. Curate slowly through a relational lens. And 4. Avoid the loud hiring tactics that scream foreign intruder.
Precisely. It is about becoming part of the local ecosystem rather than trying to dominate it from the outside. When you respect the builder culture, the builders will help you build your empire.
We've talked about talent and we've talked about consumers, but let's get into the actual high-value deals. If I'm a fintech or Web3 company, I'm not just looking for individual users. I'm looking for partnerships, institutional connections, and major clients. How does the cartridge approach work for high-level business development in Vietnam?
This is where the Nintendo Switch analogy really comes alive. Business development in Vietnam is 90% trust and 10% contract. If you show up to a meeting as a representative from the London office who is only in town for 3 days, you are at a massive disadvantage. The local partners want to know that you are committed. They want to see a face they recognize, someone who understands the local business etiquette and can read the room in a way that an outsider just can't.
It's that sit-down coffee thing again, isn't it? Even at the corporate level.
Even more so at the corporate level. A high-value deal in Vietnam often starts with several meetings that have nothing to do with the actual deal. It is about feeling out the partner. Is this company reliable? Do they respect us? Are they going to be here in 2 years? If you use a fractional local unit, you have someone who can attend those pre-meeting meetings. You have someone who can build that rapport over weeks or months, so that when the main console, the global team, plugs in, the ground is already prepared.
That sounds incredibly efficient. You're essentially using the local unit to warm up the leads and handle the cultural translation, so the global team only has to step in when it's time to finalize the technical or financial details.
Exactly. It saves so much time and money. Imagine the alternative. Flying your VP of sales back and forth from London 10 times, paying for hotels, flights, and dinners, only to have the deal fall through because they missed a subtle cultural cue in the third meeting. With a fractional unit, the boots on the ground are already there. They are part of the community. They can identify the high-value opportunities before they even hit the open market.
And I assume they can also vet the partners, because I imagine not every interested local firm is a good fit.
That is a critical point. In a booming market like Vietnam, there is no shortage of people who want to partner with a global tech firm, but many of them are just looking for a quick win or don't have the technical capacity to actually deliver. A local fractional unit acts as your filter. They can tell you, this group has a great reputation, but this other group is all hype. They save you from the straight-to-video action movie version of a partnership, the one that looks good on paper but has no depth and ultimately fails.
It's about securing deals that actually scale, rather than just vanity partnerships.
Right. And because the fractional unit is focused on the details and the budget, the global team doesn't get bogged down in the minutia of local logistics. They can stay focused on the global product. It's division of labor that makes sense. The local team handles the relational rhythm, and the global team handles the technical engine.
I love the systematic nature of this. It's not just market entry, it's market integration. You're not just a guest in the house, you're actually becoming part of the architecture.
That is the goal. When you plug in that cartridge, you are not just using Vietnam, you are contributing to it. You are bringing global tech to a local talent pool that is hungry to build. And when that alignment happens, the high-value deals follow naturally, because you are seen as a partner in the country's growth, not just another foreign company looking for an exit.
There was something you said earlier that really stuck with me. The idea of simplifying complex ideas without talking down to the audience. This feels like a major challenge for Web3 and FinTech, which are inherently complicated. How do you actually pull that off in the Vietnamese market?
It is a communication art form. You have to realize that the Vietnamese audience is technically literate, but they are also very practical. They don't want academic explanations. They want to know what it does, how it works, and why they should trust it. The simplified part is about removing the jargon and the Western-centric metaphors. If your explanation of blockchain relies on an analogy about a New York City deli, it's going to fail in Hanoi.
So you have to find local metaphors that resonate.
Exactly. You use things they understand, like the coffee culture, the way local markets work, or the history of craftsmanship in the country. You frame the technology in a way that feels at home. But, and this is the without talking down part, you don't skip the technical details. You still provide the white papers, you still show the code, you still talk about the security protocols. You just change the front door they walk through to get to that information.
It's like having a very sophisticated book with a very inviting, localized cover. Once they open it, the depth is all there.
That is exactly it. And this applies to everything, from your social media content to your UI, UX. Your brand positioning needs to be layered. The top layer is accessible and relational. The layers underneath are rigorous and technical. If a user wants to dive deep, the substance is there for them to find. This builds massive respect because it shows you aren't just trying to trick them with a flashy interface.
What is a common pitfall here? Where do companies get this balance wrong?
The most common mistake is oversimplification. They think, oh, it's an emerging market, I should make it look like a toy. They use bright, bubbly colors and childish language. That is the quickest way to lose the builder demographic. They will see that and think, this is not a serious financial tool, this is a game. In Vietnam, fintech is serious business. People are looking for ways to build wealth and secure their future. They want a tool that looks and feels professional and sturdy, like that Swiss watch we keep talking about.
So, clean and bold, but never loud.
Precisely. Your content should feel like a high-end documentary, not a Saturday morning cartoon. It should have a solid script and careful pacing. When you respect the intelligence of your audience, they reward you with their attention. And in a world where everyone is fighting for eyeballs, that kind of deep, respectful attention is the ultimate currency.
It also sounds like this helps with the regulatory gray zone we discussed. If your communication is clear, professional, and transparent, it sends a signal to regulators that you are a grown-up company that takes its responsibilities seriously.
Absolutely. Transparency is a form of compliance in its own right. When you are open about how your tech works and you are engaging with the community in a mature way, you are building social capital. That capital is incredibly valuable when you are navigating an evolving legal landscape. It shows that you are not a bad actor hiding in the shadows, but a builder contributing to the light.
So, the playbook for communication is 1. Localize the metaphors. 2. Keep the technical depth accessible but present. 3. Avoid toy-like UI or childish branding. And 4. Use transparency to build both user trust and regulatory social capital.
You nailed it. It's about being a sophisticated friend, someone who can explain the most complex thing in the world over a cup of coffee, but who clearly knows exactly what they are talking about.
This has been an incredible deep dive, Nia, but I want to make sure our listeners have a concrete action plan. If someone is sitting in their office in Singapore or London right now thinking about Vietnam, what are the first 3 moves they should make today?
Step 1. Audit your monolith bias. Stop looking at your Southeast Asia strategy as a single slide in a deck. Create a separate, dedicated strategy for Vietnam that acknowledges its builder culture and relational rhythm. If your current plan is just a translated version of your Indonesia plan, throw it away and start over.
Okay, so demonolithize. What's step 2?
Step 2. Look for your Swiss-made anchor. Don't go out and try to hire 20 people. Find one person or one partner, like a fractional local unit, who has the technical substance and the local network to be your foundation. This is your reliable automatic. They will be the filter through which you view the market and the magnet that attracts the rest of your team.
And step 3.
Step 3. Start the sit-down coffee process immediately. Don't wait until you have a perfect product to start building relationships. Get into the Telegram groups, find the key opinion leaders in the tech space, and start a transparent conversation. Show them what you are building. Be the company that simplifies without diluting. Build that system of trust now so that by the time you are ready for a high-value deal, the partners already know your name and respect your tech.
I love those 3 steps because they are all about mindset and relationships rather than just capital. It's a very lean way to start.
It is the only way to start that doesn't lead to the overhead trap. And remember the Nintendo Switch model. You don't need to move the whole company to Vietnam tomorrow. You just need to plug in the right cartridge, whether that's through a partner like 43.1 or by finding that first key hire. The goal is agility. Be ready to pivot, be ready to learn, and most importantly, be ready to respect the local builders.
One final question on the playbook. What is the red flag a founder should look out for in their own thinking?
The biggest red flag is the phrase, well, this worked in other country. If you find yourself saying that, stop. It doesn't matter if it worked in Singapore, Thailand, or the US. Vietnam is a distinct ecosystem. Every time you assume a global best practice will automatically work here, you are creating a friction point. Instead, ask, how would a Vietnamese builder view this?
That is a great mental filter. How would a builder see this? It keeps you focused on substance and local context.
Exactly. If you can answer that question, you are already ahead of 90% of the foreign companies in the market. You are no longer an intruder, you are an insider, and that is where the real growth happens.
Nia, this has been such a fascinating journey into the Vietnam play. I think what strikes me most is how much this market rewards depth, whether it's in talent, consumer engagement, or even the way you handled the gray zones of regulation. It's not a market for the lazy or the superficial.
It really isn't. Vietnam is a masterclass in intentional business. It demands your full attention and a high level of respect for the local culture and intelligence. But for those who are willing to put in the time, to sit down for that ceramic cup of coffee and build a real system of trust, the rewards are unparalleled. You are tapping into one of the most technically dense and energetic workforces in the world.
So, as we bring this to a close, I want to leave our listeners with one thought-provoking question. If you were to look at your current market entry strategy through the eyes of a Vietnam builder, would they see a Swiss-made masterpiece of substance, or would they see a flashy hublot of hype?
That is the ultimate test. And for everyone listening, I encourage you to take one idea from today. Maybe it's the watch collection hiring strategy or the cartridge model for BD, and apply it to your current thinking. See how it changes your perspective on what is possible in this incredible market.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into Vietnam versus the rest of Southeast Asia. It's been a pleasure exploring these unwritten rules with you, Nia.
Likewise, Jackson. Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope this helps you navigate your own Vietnam play with a bit more clarity and a lot more confidence. Reflect on what we've discussed, and remember, Vietnam isn't just another pin on the map. It's a place where the builders live. Respect that, and the rest will fall into place. Goodbye.